Deb Bunnell here, teaching artist with the Southern Alleghenies Museum of Art and also the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts. What is your favorite color? When I'm asked that question, I often say teal. Or if my brother Dave asks me, I'll say a very deep shade of aqua-ish. Not gonna lie, I do love aqua-ish colors, but I think I can trust you guys with this information. You won't think I'm weird or anything. My favorite color is gray. Gray is the best supporting actor in the show. Gray is the bass player in a band. Various shades of gray let all the other colors sing to their best ability. Gray can add subtlety and mood. Gray can add to the excitement. I grew up with this painting behind me. I always felt it was very haunting, with the tree branches drooping down like fingers. And now that I'm older and have painted for some decades, I love the use of grays in it. I like the warm grays. You can see warm grays in the trees and cooler grays in the water, grays with a bit of green in, grays with a bit of brown in them, a bit of green up there too, and not to mention an aqua-ish mountain in the background. Now I consider great use of grays like this a sign of maturity in an artist, because it is so fun to explore all the colors that come out of your tube, and they're brilliant and bright and fun colors. And for me, it takes some restraint to gray things down and let other colors sing, or do a painting that is mostly gray. In this painting of a carousel horse I did, there are no obvious shades of gray. And that's sort of how I tend to roll, because I just love color. But gray is a wonderful color too. And there are some not so obvious shades of gray in this. In the background is a lot of blue and green, which are complements of the reds and oranges in the horse. And the blue and greens are grayed down by using the complement of that color to mix with it. Let me show you how that can be effective. We've been told that if you want green to shine, use some red, or vice versa. And they're bright and happy, Merry Christmas colors together. But if you say we really wanted this green to shine on its own and didn't want it to have to compete so much with the red, well, we could go super dark with the red and that would help. Or we could tone the red down to a grayed out red. And look at that green. It can be the star of the show now. How about orange and blue? Orange and blue are my high school colors. I went to Hershey High School, and they look great together, don't you think? But they are sort of fighting each other. They're kind of vibrating. So I want this orange to be the star here. I want to gray down the blue. There, just look at how the orange kind of glows now. So that's using complements for grays. Resilience. That's what these roadside flowers say to me. They're not in a very kind environment, yet they come up year after year, making beautiful color for us to see as we drive past. I like the weediness of it, the intricacy of how everything's growing together. There's a nice rhythm to the stems of the Queen Anne's lace. And I did shoot a couple more varieties of wildflowers on that same day that I'm going to include in the painting. Since I have a painting that's going to have flowers in it, I like to do a little bit of research on the types of flowers and the different angles they can be at and how they look in different situations. And that often involves looking things up on the internet and looking at different pictures of the same flowers. There is a lot of Queen Anne's lace in this photograph, and you usually see that it's a big disc, right? And sometimes it has a dark purple flower right in the middle. Sometimes you don't see that. Now it's not a perfect disc. If I were to make that edge smooth, that would be wrong. It would have a lot of tiny ridges and flowers. Remember, there's thousands of flowers in one Queen Anne's lace. And then the edge that you see more, you might see like little peninsulas of flower groups jutting out that make it even look more lacy. Of course, that whole thing would be white and have some dots of texture in it too. The other way you can look at that, still seeing the full flower, if you look at it from the side, it's going to be more like an umbrella. And it might be pretty curved, it might be less curved, but that umbrella is going to have a little bit of lace ruffleage at the bottom. When a Queen Anne's lace is just starting out, before it opens up and blooms, it's like a closed umbrella. You'll see these structural things are actually the stems of the flowers, and you'll see a little bit of white at the top and more white as it opens up. Now that's kind of hard to see, so let's see if this lighter green will show up a little better. Oh, that's good. Okay. And the other way that is a cool way of looking at Queen Anne's lace is underneath it, like you're looking at the staves of an umbrella, and you might see a little bit of the white, the top white edge, but the rest of this will be more shaded. And you could see some of those little flower islands drifting down, and the stem comes out of that main center part there. One flower I'm going to include is a tiger lily, and I did see some tiger lilies and shot some of them the same day I was shooting this Queen Anne's lace, just not in the same picture, but I can put them in the picture. A lily, I can go over here for that, has 6 petals, at least this type of lily does. And 3 of the petals are more interior. And I cut them off like that because they actually curl underneath. So it looks a little truncated. And I should use a lighter shade. Okay, I'm going to use this gold and yellow because it shows up better. The other 3 petals occur behind these. Always helps to take paper off. And these I might see some of the underneath. And it's usually never symmetrical. In a lily, you will see a pistil that's pretty long, might have a little nodule at the end, and then you'll see 6 stamen that are a little shorter. On these tiger lilies that I saw, they had yellow stripes, definitely in the center of each petal, and then the orange. They were mainly orange. And when you see the underneath of a petal, like here, this little triangle, it's usually not as bright as the orange of the top part of the petal. And this is very rough. But we will see going down, you'll see some depth to this hole here. It can actually hold water. Okay, I think you can see that pretty well. But I won't be doing a direct on view of the tiger lily like that. So I'm going to draw how I remember it might be. more of a side view. And I do see the like the bottom part of the flower connecting to the stem. And where you see lilies blooming, you will see little pods that are going to become lilies. That would be one that's not quite ready, but the ones that are ready to become a lily are about as long as a lily and are faintly orange colored, orange and yellow and green at the bottom. So that's the tiger lilies. The other flower that occurs actually in the photograph is Monarda. It's also called bee balm, and it's also called wild bergamot. And if anyone's a tea drinker and likes Earl Grey tea, it's flavored with bergamot. Unfortunately, it's not the same kind of bergamot. So if you see this wildflower, don't flavor your tea with it and expect it to taste like Earl Grey. But I thought that was interesting. These flowers are sort of crown-like, and they're made of multiple flowers in one cluster, and each flower is like a little tube. It has a bottom lip that hangs over a little bit, and then the top part of the tube, each tube has 2 stamens in it. So on my photograph, where each tube has a stamen coming out, the stamens are a little bit wilted, and they end up looking like little knobs on a crown, which is, I think, is pretty cool. So where can I put that? Under this lily. So the general shape, like say those are little crown knobs, and these are the other parts of the tubes, and there was a little dot. And they also have leaves that are pretty, they're called bracts, and they support the head of flowers. And all these were facing the same way, but just upright, facing the sun. Not like this next flower, the chicory, which is so pretty to see from the side of the road, to see from your car. It's about this shade of blue, which might not show up really well unless I give you a big patch of it. It's just that you never see blue flowers in nature, not that much. And chicory is one of those. And you might think, oh, I want a bouquet of that. But if you go to pick them, you will see that they tend to have maybe a flower here and there, but they also are full of raggedy looking little buds. They're either ready to become flowers or former flowers. So a bouquet of these, I think they'd be pretty, but not as pretty as they are in a big cluster on the roadside. Now in the middle of these, it's not quite like a daisy. They have little, mostly whitish spikes that stand up. And their petals are square shaped on the edge. Well, there's one. Now you can see I shortened these petals on this side of center, and these are longer. That's because I'm showing that the flower is at an angle. And looking at chicory, they're at all kinds of random angles. They don't care where the sun is, they're just gonna blossom where they are on the stem. So some will be sideways, some you can see the front of, some will be half hidden behind a stem. I will show more attention to the detail of the ends of the petals when I'm painting. They're squared off, and if you look really close, they have a little ridgy edge, but I don't think my painting is going to be that detailed to get the little ridgy edge. But I definitely will show there's a difference between the edges of the petals in the chicory and the edges of the petals in the Black-Eyed Susan. In the Black-Eyed Susan, the petals, they almost end in a point, sort of a rounded point. One of my pet peeves about drawing daisy-like flowers is the tendency to draw all of them as if you're looking at it straight in the face, and also that all the petals are equal, kind of equal. There's people who draw a lot tidier 60s flower than I do. But, you know, say you're drawing flowers in a vase and you draw all the angles just like this with more or less equal petals, equal length. That isn't how it looks when you see them by the side of the road. Although you can look at that and say it's a black-eyed Susan. But I like to be a little more, okay, I can put the next one over here, sideways and not looking at it straight on. There could be some, and the middle of a black-eyed Susan actually sticks out. It's not flat like some daisy-like flowers are. And sometimes some of the petals have gaps between them. And sometimes petals just nudge right beside each other like that. And some of them have a funny little curve to it. And the petals in back of that flower you can't even see. And often in a group of black-eyed Susans, you'll have flowers right next to each other, so you don't really know whose petals are whose. But just some careful observation and you'll be able to make them more naturalistic looking than the 60s flower child version of a black-eyed Susan. So there we have a basic lesson on all our flowers and ready to go to the painting. Okay, to transfer this photo onto my canvas board, I enlarged it at 200% on my home copier. And in doing this, you have to enlarge a piece of it at a time. I think I took 6 copies to get it. I might have been able to do it in 4, but I didn't. And after you do that, you tape all the sections together and scribble on the back of it with a soft pencil. And I even take a Kleenex or paper towel and rub that so there's graphite everywhere that you would want to draw. Then I take a ballpoint pen. You could use a pencil, but it's hard to tell where you've been with a pencil. If I hold this up, you can see where my green ballpoint pen outlined, pressing the graphite onto the canvas board. And you can see I decided not to outline the speed limit sign here because when people see words or numbers on a painting, first thing they want to do is read the words or numbers. So eliminating that, taking out the fuzzy car that's in the middle of the road, and I'll get the framework for the painting down, and I will be adding those other flowers in there. Here is what I have so far. Came out pretty clear. After this photograph was transferred to my board in pencil, I added some flowers that I wanted to include also. I wanted to include some chicory because I just love that blue color. So I penciled that in, and I wanted to add some tiger lilies. And these look scrawny. These were blooming at the same time as the chicory and all the flowers in my photograph. So I know at least that's truthful that all these flowers can bloom at the same time. And the tiger lilies by the side of the road tend to be a little more scrawny. But you won't believe how these oranges are going to pop against all the beautiful grays that will be in this painting. Talked about including more black-eyed Susans, but decided they are shorter. This, whatever this variety is on the short side, and it was just peeking out from underneath all the other foliage, and I'm going to keep it like that. So after getting it in pencil, I took paintbrush and outlined all my pencil. This makes it easier for me to see the shapes of everything, and because I outlined them in close to the colors they will be or be next to, I'll be able to tell where I'm going when I lay in my grays and my greens and everything. So I sometimes outline in really crazy colors, but not for this painting. This painting's going to have a lot of subtlety to it. I have this bad habit, I don't know, you might have it too sometimes, of having a plan for a painting in your head. And you get it laid out on the board and you just jump into it and paint it completely and realize that it needs some major changes. Well, I want to avoid that. So this time I am starting with some thumbnails. These are actual photographs of this original paint drawing on my canvas board, and they were put into Photoshop and reproduced 4 times, but often I just do thumbnails from a line drawing of the painting, usually not this detailed. But you will see, so this is what came out of the printer from Photoshop. This is the result of 4 attempts at color schemes. I thought originally I wanted a much darker road than is on the painting. There's the road here. I thought, oh, a darker road will really make those flowers pop. And it sort of does, but I was just not satisfied with all that. And although I did gray down these background greens, they're still fairly intense greens. So when I did number 2, I made the road a little lighter and I made a gradation and just remembered how I love gradations and how they make things flow and make your eye move. And so I like that. I'm keeping this idea of the gradation, and I grade down the greens in the background so much that on the palette they look just about gray. I mean, that looks gray, but that's some of these greens in there. And the other thing I was worried about was that there's just 2 tiger lilies, and usually you want to have an odd number of prominent things. A 3rd tiger lily would have been fine, but I thought, well, what if I went with a monarch butterfly? That's a bright orange thing, sort of similar to a tiger lily in color. And I painted one in right there on the biggest Queen Anne's lace, and wasn't sure I liked it. So in the 3rd one, I gave a similar background and similar treatment to everything, but I took out the butterfly. And I also worried that this Queen Anne's lace might be too close to the edge. Was that a point of tension, or was it interesting, or what? So in the 3rd one, I put the Queen Anne's lace down here. If I were drawing the thing, I would have probably put it down here and not tried to put something so close to the edge. And I decided I actually like the tension of it being near the edge, and I like the lines and the rhythm of all the Queen Anne's lace. So I'm not going to mess with how they are. So that I'm not using. And also I did like the butterfly in there, but not certain I wanted it in a 1, 2, 3 formation. Not sure a monarch would land on a Queen Anne's lace, and actually if it did land, its wings would be folded. So I decided to put the monarch in flight. So down here in number 4, see, I have that original Queen Anne's lace back there. I was smart enough to cut it out of paper, and I like it down here the best. It's like, I'll show you on the gray how it pops. That orange just pops on the gray, and I don't really need it to do that. I just need it to balance out those tiger lilies. So I'm putting it around the 3rd line and around a 3rd down. If you visually divide your painting into thirds and have important things happen at the intersection of thirds, or at least on one of the 3rd lines, that helps your composition. It helps you not divide things in halves and quarters, because thirds are more interesting. So now I have 1, 2, 3 orange things, and I have the gradation of the road. I have the grayish greens, a little bit darker, not quite as dark as in number 1, but just a little bit darker. And I'm emphasizing the darks in this corner in this 4th thumbnail here. And I'm going to find a good reference of a monarch butterfly in flight and put it down here like it's just coming into the garden here, the roadside wild garden. I've set up my palette with the paints I will probably need for the background. This is a locking, fairly airtight palette, has a lid. I've had it go for over a month with usable paint, although some does start drying up. I have palette paper here, and underneath the palette paper I have a wet paper towel, and I often use my squirt water every 15 or so minutes just to keep the paints workable. I'm going to go through the colors I have on here. Of course, a big blob of titanium white. This was some black left over from the other palette. I don't think I'll be using it. These are my 3 yellow colors. This is your basic yellow oxide, which is a nice reliable gold color, and it can make a green look a little more earthy than this bright yellow, the cadmium yellow light, which you can see it combined with phthalo green here will give you very, very intense bright greens, which we won't have a lot of in this painting. The yellow in the middle is a color I just started using. It's called Nickel Yellow Azo. It looks like gold, but as soon as you mix it with white, it becomes an intense yellow color. It's more gold than a Hansa yellow light, but I just like it. It reminds me of a color you see in watercolors called gamboge, which I love that name. I wish there was a gamboge in acrylic paints. Greens are next up. Here's my phthalo green. You can see that brilliance there that shows you it's a phthalo. You can knock it back really easily with some crimson. This is quinacridine crimson. You might call it quin crimson or just crimson. And that mixed with phthalo, that shows it's a pretty good complement for phthalo, the fact that it grays it down so nicely. Let's even add a little white and show us how gray that is. And if you want it to lean a little bit toward the green, I would just add just a touch of phthalo green. The other green I have is Hooker's green, which is already a more natural shade of green. This is Hooker's green deep, so it's very dark. Here it is spread out a little with some water. And here it is with some of this crimson added. It's a little purplish there. There's a nice greenish gray shade there. And you can also add magenta to both of these colors. If you add it to the phthalo, you're going to get purple because there's so much blue in the purple. And purple, dioxazine purple, this really deep, nice purple, it's hard to see until you spread it out. There we go. That is also a nice color to add to greens to gray them down. Because it has a bit of the red in it, it will tone down a green. It's nice to use in shadows too, to have a little purple. The blues I have here I have cerulean blue, which I probably won't use a whole lot, but I had a piece of it left over in my last palette, so I might as well keep it going. Cobalt blue, probably my favorite blue. Here is Ultramarine Blue. It has more depth than Cobalt Blue. The grays I love to make with these blues are Ultramarine Blue. I like to mix with Burnt Umber. That's your chocolate brown there. You can use that for a black almost, especially if you added a little bit of the dioxazine purple. It could be a nice black substitute. You get a very neutral looking gray. That's leaning a little cool. You can make it lean a little warm with some brown. And that's an easy, nice gray to work with. The other beautiful gray is the Cobalt Blue and Burnt Sienna, which is how I think I'm going to go for the road in this painting. That's a warm version of it. Here's a cooler version of it. Add a little more white so you can see where that's going. That looks pretty neutral actually. The other color on my palette that I often end up mixing with some colors is right next to the Burnt Sienna, but you can see it's a little redder, a little more purpley. It's called Mars Violet or Violet Oxide or Mars Violet Oxide. And that can mix with some greens to neutralize them. There it is, and taking phthalo down a notch. And it's just a real versatile mixing color. It's not a beautiful color on its own, but I am enjoying using it. So now we're ready to start the background of the painting. Well, we've reached the end of Resilience in Shades of Grey Part 1. and we're going to finish this video with starting to paint the actual road and the actual painting. Before I had said that I had traced every pencil line with paint so I could see where I'm going. I didn't really trace every pencil line. I just traced the ones that I understood and that I wanted as main lines and main plants. So there's a lot of confusing stuff that I am not duplicating, and it's all part of using a reference photograph and making it your own. The grays I'm using for the road, let's mix up a big batch of it here with the Cobalt Blue and the burnt sienna, woo, flinging it, and white. There's a warm gray. In my thumbnail, I had a cool gray. I think I'll keep it a cool gray. That might be about the right value for the dark part. Oh, it's a little bit too dark, and it could be cooler and lighter. Going through 4 thumbnails, I think I was able to narrow down what I wanted the color to look like. Just a little bit lighter. Okay, that is the darkest part of the road. Even though the road's a big area, I'm using a fairly small brush just because there's a lot of edges and ins and outs. And this paint is going on a little bit watery. It's been sitting overnight in my moist palette, and it's that golden open paint, so it has absorbed the water, and it's gonna take a while to dry. But this is just the first layer, and it will be a guide for what color things will be. I want to get some of this gradation that goes down before I turn it into time lapse. Let's see, the dark part comes down to around here and then starts getting lighter. Let's see, I'm adding white. Oops, there was another piece of color in there. It warmed it up a little. And when I get down to these streaks that go across, they will be darker too, but it'll be a soft blend. I may try to make them look like gravel, or they may be just made up of brush strokes. That's something you can decide as you're going along. Oops, went into that stem a little. Okay, how light does it really get down at the bottom? Oh, even lighter than that. It looks like it's almost white on my palette, but sometimes it's hard to make things light enough because they just don't look like a color that would show up. So this is the color I'm headed for. Even up further, it is that light, so even in here. Okay, I'll see you in part 2 where we bring this painting, Resilience, to life. Now for some time lapse.